The boy had not made a sound in 4 months, and I had heard every one of them, which is to say, none at all. I would know. I was usually the one on my knees at the hearth in whatever room he had been left to sit silent in, and when you spend your days being looked through, you stop talking and you learn to listen. Silence has a texture. His had gone from the soft kind, the kind that might still break open, to the hard kind that has decided something. His mother had been gone since the first frost. The pack said she had run, that the Luna had abandoned her alpha and her son and slipped into the dark like a woman ashamed of something. I did not believe it, but no one had asked me, because no one in the Hollow Pack asks the opinion of a rejected Omega, and I had learned a long time ago to keep my opinions where I kept everything else that was mine, out of sight. That is what I am, if we are to be honest with each other before we begin. 4 and 20, and rejected. My fated mate stood up 2 winters past and spoke the words that sever a bond in front of everyone who mattered, and named another woman in the same breath, and from that hour I have been the thing the pack steps around in the corridor. Proof, they think, that a wolf can look at you and find you wanting down to the root. They gave me the fires to tend, and the low kitchens to scrub, and the great gift of being invisible, and I took all 3, because invisible is survivable, and I have made surviving into something close to a craft. I could have left. I want that understood from the start. A rejected Omega can walk to another pack and become a stranger instead of a story, and I had coin enough hidden in my mattress to try it twice over. I stayed in the hollow because of the boy, because someone had to be gentle with a child no one could reach, even if the gentleness had to be spent where no one would catch me at it, so I spent it where no one would catch me. I left the soft end of the loaf where his small hand would find it. I banked his fire last and built it highest. When the household swept past him, as though grief were a thing you could catch from a child, I would kneel at his hearth far longer than the hearth needed, and say nothing, and simply let him not be alone in a room with another living soul for a quarter hour. He never looked at me. I told myself that was all right. I was well used to not being looked at. His name was Valley. He was 5 years old, and he had his mother's eyes, and he had not spoken since the night she vanished. His father I knew the way the whole pack knew him, which is to say from a careful distance. Rurik of the Hollow was the kind of alpha king the songs are about, broad and grim and absolute. A wolf no challenger had ever walked away from. Since the first frost he had become something else, something the songs do not cover, a man moving through his own hall like a stone going cold. He held his court, he ruled his lands. He did all of it from somewhere very far behind his own eyes, and he had not, that anyone could tell me, sat in a room alone with his silent son in 4 months. Not because he did not love the boy, I came to think, but because the boy's silence was a mirror he could not bear to stand in front of. In his place stood his cousin. Lord Dmitri ran the Hollow's affairs now in all the ways that mattered, smooth and tireless, and everywhere at once, the loyal kinsman, holding the pack together while its king grieved. Everyone said how fortunate it was that the king had such a cousin. I tended the fires in the rooms where Lord Dmitri did his work, and I had noticed that a man with nothing to hide does not lower his voice quite so often when the hearth girl comes in. But again, no one had asked me. There was one more thing that was mine and out of sight, and I will tell you about it now, because it matters more than I knew. A carved swallow, small enough to close my hand around, wings folded, cut from pale wood by someone who had loved the doing of it. The Luna had given it to me. It had been late summer, before the frost, before any of this. I had been crying in the still-room passage where I thought no one went, over nothing, over the particular loneliness of a feast night when you are the one who is not invited, and Thora had found me there. The Luna. She had not swept past. She had sat down on the cold step beside the rejected Omega as though there were nowhere in the world she would rather be, and she had closed my fingers around the little carved bird, and she had said, "A swallow always knows the way home, even when it has flown a long way wrong. Keep it. You will find your way back to yourself." And then she had gone, and 3 weeks later, so had she, and I had told no one that the vanished Luna had been, in the last kind act anyone could remember of her, kind to me. I kept the swallow in my apron. I am telling you about it now so that you will understand what happened in the Great Hall, the day Valley made his first sound in 4 months, and the whole of my life turned over in the space of a single minute. I had been sent up with kindling. That was all. The Great Hall was full, the noon court, lords and warriors and the long tables, Lord Dmitri at the king's right hand with a sheaf of grievances, the king on his black seat, looking at all of it from behind his eyes. Valley sat where they always set him, on a low stool near the dais, present and forgotten, a small, still island the court flowed. I came in at the servants' end with my arms full of wood, head down, invisible, and I crossed toward the side hearth, the way I had crossed that hall 100 times. And the boy stood up. I did not see it at first. I heard the hall change, a hush running outward from the dais like a ring in water, and I looked up. And Valley was on his feet, and he was looking not through me, at me, the way no one in that pack had looked at me in 2 years, his whole small body turned toward me across the length of the floor. And he opened his mouth, and into a hall gone utterly silent, in a voice rusty and certain and far too large for him, the child who had not made a sound in 4 months said one word. "Eloin. My name." He said my name. I have gone over the next 60 seconds more times than I can count, because everything I have now began inside them. The hall did not breathe. 300 faces turned from the boy to the hearth-girl, and could not make the 2 things fit. The kindling went out of my arms and clattered across the stone, and I did not hear it. And the king came up off his black seat, as though something had reached into him and lifted him, and he crossed that hall, his hall, past his startled lords and his open-mouthed cousin, the length of it at a near run, and he went down on one knee in front of his son, the Alpha King of the Hollow, on his knee on his own floor, and he said in a voice I had never heard a powerful man use, ragged and afraid to hope, "Say it again. Valley, say it again for me." And Valley looked at his father. And then he looked back at me, across the hall, and he did not say it again. He held out his hand toward me instead, not the gesture of a child reaching for comfort. I have turned this over so many times. He did not reach the way a frightened boy reaches for someone to hold him. He reached the way you reach when you are trying to give something to someone, or lead them somewhere, palm up, urgent, his eyes going from me to his father and back, as though he were trying to make the grown people understand a thing he had only the one word for. The king turned and followed his son's gaze to its end, and for the first time in 2 years, the most powerful wolf in the hollow looked directly at me. I would like to tell you I met it with grace. I curtsied so fast I nearly went down among the spilled kindling, and I said the only thing my whole training had left me able to say, which was, "Forgive me, my lord, I'll go." And the king said, "No," with such force that the word stopped me where I stood. "You will not go," Rurik said. "You will not go anywhere at all." That is how I came up out of the cellars of that pack and into the light, in the space of a minute, on the strength of a single word from a child, and how I learned, far too slowly, that the word had not meant what every soul in that hall took it to mean. They moved me into the upper house that very day. The hearth girl, who had been told for 2 years to make herself unseen, was given a room near the nursery and the task no one else had managed, which was simply to be near the boy. The king wanted whatever thread reached his son kept close, and I was, apparently, the thread. I did not know how to be looked at. I had to learn it the way you learn to walk on a turned ankle, carefully, and aware the whole time of the thing that had been hurt. Valley did not speak again, not the next day, nor the day after. But he came to me. He would cross a room to put his hand in mine, that same urgent way, and tug, and lead me to the window, to a particular cold corridor, to the door of his mother's sealed rooms, where he would stand and look up at me as though waiting for me to understand something, and grow frustrated, and pull me onward to the next place. He was telling me something. I knew it in my bones. I simply could not read the language, and the only person who had spoken it was 4 months gone. The king began to come to the nursery. He came badly at first, the way a man approaches a fire he has been burned at, standing in the doorway, unable to cross it, watching his son not look at him. I learned the shape of him in those evenings. He was not cold, whatever the songs had decided. He was a man holding a grief so large that letting any of it move felt like it might bring the whole structure down, and so he had simply stopped moving, and called the stillness strength because the alternative had no name he could say out loud. "He spoke for you," the king said to me one evening, low, not quite an accusation. 4 months of physicians and pack healers and his own father, and nothing, and he spoke for the... He stopped. He had been about to say the rejected Omega, the hearth girl, and he heard it, and he did not say it. That mattered to me more than I let it show. For the woman who tended his fire, I finished, so he would not have to. I don't know why, my lord. I never did anything but be in the room. No one else managed even that. He looked at his son, asleep at last. I could not be in the room. His silence, his jaw worked. I told myself I was giving him space. I was protecting myself. He went quiet, and I went away, and I have hated myself for 4 months and called it ruling. He said it plainly, the way you confess a thing to a stranger precisely because they are a stranger and cannot use it. You did not go away. A woman this pack has given nothing did not go away from my son. I find I would like to understand that, and I do not think you will lie to me, because you have no reason left to want anything from me. That's true, I said. I haven't. And then, because he had told me a true thing, and it seemed only fair, I stayed because I know what it is to be in a room full of people and have not one of them see you. I wasn't going to let that happen to a child. It's a small thing to give. It was the only thing I had. He looked at me for a long moment, and something behind his eyes came a little nearer the front of them, and he did not say anything at all, which I was learning was, with him, a kind of speech. I should tell you, because I am told that you, listening, are part of this now too, and because the boy who could not speak would want the company kept, that if you have ever been the one nobody in the room could see, and you stayed kind anyway, I would like to know I am not telling this into an empty hall. Stay with me, and subscribe if you would. The part I most need you to hear is next. The part where I finally understood what Valley had been trying to tell me, and what it cost all of us when I did. Because Lord Dmitri had been watching all of it, and Lord Dmitri did not like what he saw. He came to me himself, which clever men in his position rarely do. He found me in the upper corridor, and he was all warmth, all concern, the loyal cousins sparing a moment for the help. He spoke of how unsuitable it was, really, for the heir to attach himself to he searched delicately, to a woman in my particular circumstance. A rejected Omega. There were those who whispered that such a woman carried a kind of ill fortune, that a wolf found wanting by its own fate might pass the wanting on, and surely I would not wish to be the cause of harm to the boy. It would be kinder to all, he said, gently, to step back. He would arrange a quiet place for me, away from the upper house, away from Valley, for everyone's good. It was beautifully done. By the end of the week he had said the same thing, in the same gentle voice, to half the upper house and to the king's own council, and the whispers I had spent 2 years living inside came up out of the cellars after me. A council was called on the question of whether the rejected Omega should be kept near the heir. I stood outside the door of it, in the cold corridor where Valley liked to lead me, and I understood that I was about to be sent back down into the dark, and that this time there would be no child's word to lift me out, because the whole point of Dmitri's care was to make certain the child never had the chance to speak again. And the king came out of that council, and he had not sent me down. He had done the opposite. He had stood, his second Brogan told me later, and reminded his cousin and his council that the boy had spoken 1 word in 4 months, and that the word had been my name, and that any man who proposed to remove from his son the single thread that had reached him could explain that choice to the king directly. And at length he had defended a rejected Omega to her face's worth of lords who outranked her by every measure the pack had. And then, this is the part Brogan told me, with something careful in his voice, the king had said that the matter of who tended his son was the king's to decide, and that he had decided it some time ago. The first night he stood in that nursery doorway and could not cross it, and watched a hearth-girl do for his child what he could not do himself. He had been arranging my protection for weeks, quietly, before I knew there was anything to protect me from. I had thought myself invisible again, doing my small work in the upper house, and all the while the king had been standing between me and his cousin's gentle knives, and saying nothing, because saying it would have made it a debt, and he did not want me to owe him. I did not know what to do with that. I was a woman who had been taught, very thoroughly, that I was not worth standing in front of. I went and found the king in the dark of the nursery, where he had taken to sitting by his sleeping son, and I said, "You stood up for me. In council, you didn't have to tell me." Brogan told me, "Brogan talks too much." Why? He was quiet a long time. "Because I watched a woman with every reason to leave choose a child who could give her nothing," he said at last, and I thought, there is a person who knows the difference between being wanted and being needed, and chooses anyway. I have been afraid of feeling anything since the frost. You made me feel that I was a coward, and then you made me feel that it might not be too late to stop. I have not felt that twice in a season. I am not going to let my cousin I have been spoken to, in my life, by men who wanted something. This was not that. He wanted nothing from me that I could see. He had simply told me the truth in the dark. The way you can only tell it to someone the world has decided does not count. And I sat down on the cold floor of that nursery beside the King of the Hollow. And for a while neither of us said anything, and it was the least alone I had been in 2 years. Valley told me the rest himself 3 nights later, in the only language he had left. He woke from a dream and would not be soothed, and he climbed down from his bed and took my hand and pulled, urgent, frantic, to the window, to the corridor, to the sealed door of his mother's rooms, and this time, when I did not understand, he did a new thing. He reached into the front of his nightshirt and pulled out, on a cord around his neck, a small carved swallow. Wings folded, pale wood, the twin of the one in my apron, and I understood, all at once, the way cold water understands you. The boy had not spoken my name because he had chosen me for a month. I had let the whole pack believe that, and believed half of it myself because it was the gentle reading, and I am as hungry for gentle readings as anyone. But Valley had not been reaching for comfort in that hall. He had been keeping a promise. His mother had carved 2 swallows. She had given one to a rejected Omega on a stillroom step and told her she would find her way home. And she had kept one for her son, and somewhere in the days before the frost, when she knew what I now knew she must have known, Thora had put it into his hand and told him a name. If something happens, if you cannot find me, find Eloin. She will know what to do. He had been carrying that instruction in his silent mouth for 4 months, waiting for the woman his mother named to walk into a room. And when I did, he had said the only word that mattered, and then he had tried, every day since, to lead me to the thing his mother meant me to find. He pulled me to the sealed door. And this time I did not stop at it. I opened it. What was inside Thora's rooms I will not spend long on. Because it was not a treasure, and it was not a body, it was a letter, sewn into the lining of a cloak where only someone looking for it would find it, in a Luna's careful hand, naming the cousin who had been bleeding the pack for years, and the night she had confronted him with it, and her certainty that she would not survive the knowing. She had not run. She had been removed by a smooth, tireless man who held the hollow together while its king grieved, and she had spent her last free hours making sure the truth would walk into a hall one day on a child's tongue, and a rejected Omega's keeping. I had the letter in my hands when Lord Dimitri found us. He was not gentle that time. There was no audience to be gentle for. He understood at one glance what I held, and a man who has murdered his Luna does not balk at a hearth-girl and a child. And he came across that room to take the letter and the boy, and end the only 2 loose threads left in the world. And I did the one thing there was to do, which was put myself and the letter between him and Valley, and shove the boy back through the door, and call out, once, as loudly as a woman who has been quiet for 2 years can call. It cost me. I will not dress it up. His hand caught me as I turned, and I went down hard against the door's edge, and I felt something open along my arm, and the warm wrong rush of it, and the letter nearly went from my grip. But I did not let it go, and I did not stop calling. And the corridor that Valley had led me down so many cold times turned out to be the fastest way to the king's own apartments. And the king heard. What came through that door was not a man. Rurik had spent 4 months turning his grief to stone to keep it from killing him, and the sight of his son shoved bleeding pale through a doorway and a rejected Omega bleeding on the floor between a murderer and his heir broke the stone all at once. I have never felt anything like it, and I hope never to again. The grief of an Alpha King coming loose all at the same moment, the air going thick and cold with it, the whole room leaning toward the force of it. Dimitri's careful face came apart, and I, bleeding, on the floor, with the letter in my fist, found that I was the only one in that room not drowning in it. Because grief was the water I had been treading for 2 years, and I knew how to keep a head above it, so I did the last thing, the thing only I could do. I did not run from the king's grief breaking open. I got up, with my bad arm and my whole body shaking, and I went to him, not away, and I put the letter into his hands, and I said the truth of it plainly, so the guards Brogan was even then bringing through the door would hear every word. She did not run. She never ran. Your cousin took her, and she spent her last night making certain you would know it. Valley has been carrying it for 4 months. He could not say it, so she gave him my name. My voice did not break. It had had a great deal of practice not breaking. She kept her promise. Now keep yours. And the cold went out of the room, because the king turned from the thing he might have done to Dimitri and crossed instead to his son, and gathered the boy up against him. And the most powerful wolf in the hollow wept into his child's hair, while his cousin was taken in irons from the room, and Valley, in his father's arms, looked at the open door of his mother and then at me, and said his second word in 4 months. Mama said, he said. And then, the way a dam goes, all at once and then everything, Mama said find Eloin. Mama said you'd know. I couldn't say it. I couldn't make the words come. I'm sorry. I tried. And his father held on to him and told him he had been the bravest wolf in the whole hollow. And he had. And we all of us sat down on the floor of the dead Luna's rooms and let 4 months of silence finally break. The reckoning that followed was not gentle, and I would not have had it gentle. Dimitri's careful web came apart, thread by thread, once there was a hand willing to pull it. The years of bleeding the pack, the council members he had bought, the truth of the frost. He did not see another summer. Thora's name was spoken again in the hall, cleared, honoured, the Luna who had not run, who had spent her death protecting her son. Some in the pack found it hard to look at me. Even then, a rejected Omega does not become respectable overnight, simply because a dead queen trusted her, and a living child loves her. And there were lords who muttered that the king's judgment had gone soft. The king answered them the way he answered everything now, which was directly, and without fear, like a man who has remembered he is alive and does not intend to apologize for it. He came to me, after, when my arm was bound, and the house was quiet. He did not make a speech. He had never been good at speeches. That was Dimitri's gift, and look what it had been for. He simply took my unhurt hand and held it a moment longer than courtesy asked, and said, I spent 4 months believing the best thing left in my life was over, and the whole time it was downstairs, banking my son's fire and saying nothing. I am the king of the hollow, and I cannot believe how nearly I let them carry you off as an inconvenience. He looked at me the way I had stopped believing anyone would. I am not asking you to be anything. You have been asked to be things your whole life and found wanting. I only want to know if I may be allowed to court you very badly. for a very long time, until you believe that you were never the thing that was wanting. It was the eyes that looked at you. Every one of them, including, for 2 years, mine. I will tell you about the kiss only this much. It was not the pack he was choosing me in front of, though he did that too, later, in the hall, with the whole court watching, and his hand in mine, and not a tremor in him. The kiss was just ours, in a quiet room, and what broke open in me when it came was not longing. It was the oldest and most disbelieving relief. The feeling of a thing I had been told was rejected being. All this time, simply waiting for the right wolf to know its worth. I had been carrying a swallow that knew the way home. I had only had the directions wrong about where home was. A year on, I am writing this from the upper house, which is mine now, in the way that things are yours when no one can take them, by law and by the child asleep down the corridor, who calls me by a name that is not Eloin any more, though I will not tell you which one yet. Some things you have to earn the right to hear. And we have time. Valley talks without stopping. He has a great deal of 4 months to make up for, and he is making it up at the top of his lungs. And there are mornings the king and I look at each other across the breakfast of a very loud child, and laugh at the silence we used to think we wanted. There are 2 carved swallows on the windowsill now, set side by side where the morning light comes in. Valley does not wear his around his neck anymore. He set it there himself, one day in the spring, next to mine, and when I asked him why, he said his mother told him a swallow only needs to carry you until you get home, and then it gets to rest. So, they rest. I dust them, and I leave them, and some mornings I find a small hand has turned them to face the window, the way you point a thing toward the way out, just in case. But none of us are going anywhere. That is the part I never let myself imagine. In the cold years, not the grand thing, not the crown. Just the staying, just a house where I am looked at, on purpose, every day by people who went out of their way to find me. So tell me, did you read it the way I did, that the boy was reaching for a mother? Or did you see, before I did, that he was keeping his mother's word? Leave it below, I read every one, and Valley, who can now read a little, insists on hearing them all. And if you would like to know how a rejected Omega learned to be a Luna, a pack had to be taught to deserve, and how a grieving king learnt to court someone very badly for a very long time, exactly as promised, then stay and subscribe, and I will tell you the rest. There is a great deal of noise in this house now. I would not trade 1 moment of it for all the quiet in the world. Wherever you are listening from tonight, if there is someone in your rooms the world has stopped seeing, go and be in the room with them a while. You never know what they have been waiting to say.